If you want to understand the personality of Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, I think that a good place to start is with episode 25 at the very beginning of the Hidden Inventory arc. There's a revealing conversation between Gojo and Geto that takes place when the two are still students at Tokyo Jujutsu High, and they have this disagreement about the role of Jujutsu sorcery in human society more broadly. Geto claims that Jujutsu sorcerers embody a central moral principle of civilization, which is that the strong have a duty to protect the weak. And this moral principle gives Jujutsu sorcerers their righteous purpose, which is to protect ordinary mortals from the violence and terror of cursed spirits. And so in Geto's view, Jujutsu is kind of like a noble pillar of civilization itself. But when Gojo realizes that this is what Geto sincerely believes, he expresses a little bit of contempt for his worldview. Because Gojo completely rejects the idea that Jujutsu sorcery answers any kind of righteous calling in human society. And even though Gojo doesn't exactly offer an alternative interpretation of the social significance of Jujutsu sorcery, it's clear that his views are a lot more cynical than Geto's, at least at the time of this conversation. But I think that should honestly strike us as pretty surprising, because if you only focused on Gojo's actions rather than his speech, it's pretty clear that he's one of the noblest and most morally upstanding Jujutsu sorcerers in the show. Or at any rate, he's certainly a much better guy than Geto, and for that matter, he's a lot better than most of the prominent authorities who have leading positions in the other Jujutsu clans. Because Geto, on the one hand, obviously became a villain who sought to destroy the bulk of humanity. And then when it comes to the leading sorcerers of the clans, we see time and again throughout the show how utterly ruthless and inhumane they are in their quest for power. For example, we see how eager they are to sacrifice the lives of child sorcerers like Yuji, Yuta, and Riko the moment they pose any threat to their order. And if it were not for Gojo's influence, the clans would have never even considered the possibility of allowing these children to live. It sometimes seems like Gojo is the only sorcerer with any influence over the clans who also believes that forcing these children to sacrifice their lives should be the last resort, not your first resort. And all of this explains why I think it should be at least a little bit surprising that Gojo rejected Geto's idea that Jujutsu sorcerers had this morally righteous purpose in human society. It's surprising because Gojo himself is one of the most morally righteous sorcerers around. So there's this question of why doesn't Gojo's ideology match his actions? Well, I think there's a way in which we've already answered that very question. Gojo understands better than anyone just how corrupt and corruptible Jujutsu sorcerers really are. Gojo has seen firsthand how even the leading sorcerers of the clans care more about power and convenience than heroism and morality. The reality is that many of them would kill their own children, or the children of their very best friends, if that's what it took to protect their legacy. And this is the reason why Gojo is so cynical about the social function of Jujutsu sorcery, even though he's also an upstanding guy who uses his powers for generally noble and heroic purposes. Gojo simply understands the political reality, that most sorcerers are really just in it for themselves, and the clans are in it to protect their power. And even Gojo himself is sometimes just a little bit too lazy to be as attentive to his duties as he really ought to be.